This is Adrian Hart with your Southeast Colorado News here at Valley View-Hillcrest Cemetery in Rocky Ford, Colorado. We're with Rebecca Goodwin. She's the Otero County Historic Preservation Officer.
Yes.
And you've had several projects. We've talked about the Manzanola Church. We've talked about lots of stuff.
Yes.
The Mason Building in downtown
Masonic Building, yes.
Masonic Building.
Yes.
Let's get it right.
Yes, yes.
That's what you're here for.
That's what I'm here for,
You're
yes.
going to teach us all about maps, and you're going to talk about why this cemetery is on the national map.
Yes,
So
yes.
tell us about it, would you?
So I think this is our opportunity to really announce this formally, and this is a big thing for Otero County.
Absolutely.
It is official. Rocky Ford's Valley View-Hillcrest Cemetery is now on the National Register of Historic Places, which is really significant. It says that this cemetery is especially unique, and cemeteries are something that it's harder to get onto a national register because there has to be, it's not just about just the people that are buried there.
Right. So it's
the
not
bigger context of certain things.
It's not an individual's prominence,
right.
You know, just because George Swink is buried here.
Right. Which is certainly part of it.
Absolutely part of it.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to snap some pictures of that.
Yes.
And we're going to be celebrating
yes.
his traditions
Yep.
just around the corner.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So really it's the blending of cultures.
Well,
that's a big part of it,
It's
right?
a big part of it. So in addition to the unique layout of this cemetery,
Yep.
it's eligible. It's on the National Register because of this unique landscape of the two very distinct cemetery layouts and design concepts.
Yeah, the one that's in the circles and the other that's a more plotted.
It was very
squared off.
plotted in the grid pattern,
Yep.
which was the city cemetery initially, and Hillcrest, which was started by the U-Sticks, was laid out in a very different concept. So it's on the register because you don't usually see those two very distinct designs in one cemetery.
Yeah.
And then it was also listed because of its association. There were so many people that really helped build this area.
Okay.
But specifically for the ethnic history associated with the settlement patterns and the early history of the Japanese Americans and the Hispanic Latinos of this area. I think it's important to mention, you know, where we stand now was part of Mexico.
Absolutely.
You know, this is important, and there are a number of Hispanic families that are still here that are among the very earliest of the people that were in this part of Colorado.
Yeah, those pioneers.
Those pioneers
and their family
and their
is
families,
here.
and some of those families are buried here. And then the other part is the Japanese American, and there's multiple. There's over 230 Japanese American burials here. They're spread out. Most of them are in Block 21, but they're spread out in some of the adjoining blocks and some other areas. And there's a misconception that the Japanese, I've heard it quite often, that, well, they're here because of the Japanese internment camp.
Because of Campamachi.
Campamachi, which is not true. The Japanese were here much earlier. There's some evidence might have been some Japanese here prior to 1900, but we know that there really started coming. The American Crystal Sugar Factory here in Rocky Ford was completed in 1901.
Yep.
And they quickly found out that they didn't have enough people to farm.
Absolutely.
Because they were already farming, you know, the melons and the other things in the area.
Well, it was huge.
It was huge.
The sugar companies coming to the valley created the communities within the valley. We're going to take a look at this Ortho Mosaic Map created by Lex Nichols with Otero County in this historic preservation effort going on here at the Rocky Ford Cemetery. Just a huge project. Explain the Ortho Mosaic Map for us, would you, Rebecca?
Okay, so this was important. This is something, the mapping is required to fully map the cemetery as part of the National Register nomination. But part of what makes this cemetery, Rocky Ford's Valley View-Hillcrest Cemetery, significant and unique is it was two cemeteries with completely different designs that became one. So you can see here on what's the east side of the cemetery, the Valley View, laid out on the very typical grid pattern. which is part of a cemetery movement called the Town and Country. They tended to be city cemeteries that were outside the city, kind of out in the pastoral areas, laid out very specifically, very clean with the grid pattern. And that's laid next to the Hillcrest Cemetery, which was originally, it was a private cemetery, or that was owned privately. It was established by Carl Usick Sr. and his wife Millicent. They platted it in 1923. And you can see that it's laid out in like overlapping ovals, circles. And that's reminiscent of what we call the park landscape, lawn movement of cemeteries.
Right.
Which really started with the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston.
Very different approaches and styles to go ahead.
That makes it interesting. You rarely see those two very distinct kinds of cemetery in the same place. So they were two separate cemeteries until the early 1960s, when the Usycks sold this and turned it over to the city of Rocky Ford. So that's one of the reasons why the cemetery is so significant, is because for this landscape design, which is unusual.
So Rebecca, can you tell us about the language and the styles on the gravestones in the Japanese section that really sets them apart?
It really sets them apart. What you'll see on a lot of the headstones, this is called kanji. It's a traditional form of Japanese writing that makes these very unique. And the other thing that is unique in this cemetery is how elaborate these headstones are. But one of the things that came up was there is nobody in this area that reads kanji, including even the Japanese Americans.
Oh, wow.
And in some cases, we didn't know the details of who was buried here and what these said. So as part of the project with the grant funding, we hired a man by the name of Jonathan Thumas. He's a PhD candidate at Harvard in Asian cultures and languages, and he translated the kanji for us, which is really quite interesting, so that we know exactly what these say, and they tell us a lot about the people that were buried here. It'll often say, you know, maybe where a lot of these were a lot of the early ones, they were born in Japan. They came here. They're Issei. It may say, some of these say where in Japan they were born. In a few cases, it also gives kind of where their family was within Japanese society. And so it gives us a lot of information. And this was really important because in some cases it's all Japanese, so even the name of who's buried there has been lost.
Wow.
And so we were able to get these all translated, and we greatly appreciate Jonathan for doing that.
Wow. Really overcoming a language barrier with the project.
Yes.
So a big part of this project was really uncovering those untold stories.
Yes.
Because the people buried here were the culture setters.
Right.
Really.
They really are, and they tell the history, and I think their contributions to this area, many have been forgotten.
Right.
So our advisors identified the 5 themes, and then we identified actually 6 people representing the 5 themes, and really did the research to document those people.
And their stories.
And their stories.
How they came to
Right.
Rocky Ford.
Right.
And what they did while they were
Right.
here, right?
Exactly. So one of those, of course, is Colonel Suiko Kumagai here. You can see the headstone behind us. Suiko was born down near McClave. Her mother died when she was only a couple weeks old, and her father when she was 4 years old.
Okay.
And so she was lived with some neighbors for a while until her older sister married Kiji Hirakata.
Okay.
Toki married Kiji, and so she came to live with them. She then went on, graduated from school, went off to work, and at a point decided that she was encouraged that she'd be a really good nurse. So she applied for nursing school in Denver. This wasn't too long before Pearl Harbor.
Ah.
And the nursing school really didn't want to accept her. There was 4 Japanese young ladies. They really didn't want to accept them, but they did the background checks and they did everything. And basically the comment was, well, I guess we have to take you. And then Pearl Harbor happened. The 4 Japanese nursing students were interrogated by the FBI. They were the background checks and really kind of harassed, and they were allowed to stay. They were not allowed to wear the same uniform as the rest of the Japanese nursing students.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a lot of prejudice, and this was in Denver.
Some segregation.
Segregation, but they were part of the same nursing school.
Right.
She graduated, she volunteered with the Army Nursing Corps, and it was, by that time she was sent to the East Coast to be a nurse in a military hospital for returning soldiers. She then volunteered, left the service, was called back in, and she went to Japan with the agency that was following up with what happened after the dropping of the bombs.
Right.
And the impacts on the community. She worked with that in documenting the impacts of the radiation for so many people that were injured and suffered a lot of illnesses, of how to document that, how to deal with it. And then taught the Japanese nurses English. She spoke Japanese, English, and how to really care for the soldiers. Suiko went on to become, she served in the Korean War. She served in the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
She was in Stuttgart. She was in Japan. She was in Vietnam. She was overseeing 20 field hospitals. And then she eventually, after the war, she came back to the United States, and she finished her career at Fitzsimmons Hospital as a chief nurse.
Wow.
And so she really represents, you know, the prejudice and the strife and the challenges that she had to overcome.
Yeah.
And she went on. She never married, and in a wonderful article about her, she stated that I married Uncle Sam.
Wow.
And which really, she really did. And
that's a powerful quote from someone who went through so much suffrage.
It is.
Because of Uncle Sam.
Exactly.
And what an amazing story.
Right. It is an amazing story. The story of another one of those is Hank Kanishi, who had grown up, his family had done quite well. They were in the Imperial Valley of Southern California. They had a farm. His father was partners in a couple of large brokerage, produce broking companies. But the father died 5 days before Pearl Harbor, and Hank had to load up his mother and 2 sisters, and they initially self-deported, is what they called it, to Oklahoma, where he had a job, and then came to Rocky Ford to work in the seed industry. And as we know, Hank married Amy Nakayama, and went on, but he served, and again, he was drafted, served in World War II in military intelligence, and was actually sent to the South Pacific to translate, among other things.
Right.
And I think it's really important. One of the stories themes that the group really identified was acceptance. And I think going into the project, we kind of thought there'd be 5 Japanese Americans that we'd be highlighting, but one is an Anglo, Harry B. Mendenhall, who had come here, and he worked at the bank. But every Japanese descendant that we speak to speaks to how important Harry Mendenhall Sr. was to their families. He was the only banker that would lend them money. He would give them financial and business advice. He would help them out. He would attend New Year's celebrations and a lot of things, and was always very accepting and stood up for the Japanese. And so he really represents acceptance and what is the best of this country.
Taking a look at the other big cultural movement in Southeast Colorado.
Yes.
The Hispanic Section.
Yes, the Hispanic Latino section. And, you know, as we said earlier, this was part of Mexico, but there's so many of the earliest settlers in this area were Hispanic. And then many more have come in. Actually, the American Crystal Sugar Factory recruited from Sonora, Mexico, for a number of people to come here. But so the Hispanic history of the cemetery also makes it, and what it represents, eligible for the National Register. I think there's something that is really kind of important to recognize that. And one of the really important events that, extremely sad events associated with the cemetery, was in 1957. There was a horrific train truck accident outside of Rocky Ford at Vroman.
Right.
And it was a truck of farm workers headed to the field, and there was a lot of boxcars parked on the siding, and he could not see. and pulled out, and they were hit by a train going about 45 miles an hour.
Oh, man.
12 people in that truck were instantly killed. And the other few were injured. 2 of them not terribly, but they were injured. And that was really a horrific event. Up to that point, that was the worst train vehicle accident in Colorado that had ever happened.
Wow.
The community really came together, and again, this says a lot about the community. The community came together. They raised funds. The Catholic Church helped out. They had food. They raised the money to bury the 12 individuals, and they're all buried here together. There's a group of headstones that either say June 11th, 1957 or 1957, and they're all buried here together. But there's a lot of Hispanics, Latinos that really helped build Rocky Ford in this area.
Absolutely.
Going back through some of the World War II discharge papers, between November of 1944 and 1945, late summer, there were at least 117 Spanish surname men from Rocky Ford that were discharged from the service. And another person that's buried here that I think story has been forgotten was Sergeant John Ben Valdez. He was born up in Pueblo, grew up in an adobe house.
Okay.
They moved down here, but in 1966, he graduated from Rocky Ford High School and immediately enlisted in the Marines and was sent to Vietnam. And unfortunately, Sergeant Valdez, he was killed on August 13th, 1969. There, he was on patrol with his platoon and they were ambushed. And another one of the Marines was seriously injured, and Sergeant Valdez ran in and pulled him out, carried the wounded man back to safety, but he was gravely wounded and passed away from those wounds. And the President of the United States presented a Silver Star Medal to him posthumously. So there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of people that really helped build Rocky Ford, a lot of business owners. Mr. Gardano, if you know where the Rocky Ford High School is, that was originally the Alta Vista camp that was built for the Hispanic workers for the sugar factory.
Okay.
Mr. Gardano ran a store up there for many years until it was demolished. So there's a lot of history here, and all that history needs to be documented. You know, especially the Hispanic history and the Japanese, it has been kind of ignored, not ignored, but not given the weight that it should. And so that's part of this project, is to do that. I think one thing I really want to mention, that this was a large project and it takes a lot of people to do it. First, we have to thank History Colorado, the State Historical Fund, who gave us the grant for this project.
Yep.
And we were able to do it because of the important Hispanic and Japanese history. What was called a BIPOC waiver for Black Indigenous people of color. Okay. And because we're documenting that history, we got a waiver, so we didn't have to come up with a normal 25% cash match, which really helps. But those who really helped us, of course, the City of Rocky Ford, both the current city manager in the past and the mayor and the city councils, for giving us permission. We had to have written permission to do this. Otero County, the county commissioners, because this was done through the Otero County Historic Preservation Board, gave us permission, and Otero County actually was the applicant for the grant.
Okay. And
is managing that grant. And then first and foremost, we have a group of Japanese American advisors and people that have really helped us both on the first project to do the survey and the context in this one. Right. Kenji Biltaketa, Sandy Kanishidel, Sumi Hiraki, Donna Hirakata, Peggy Sudo, and a number of other families that have provided us information and helped us research. We even went to the Imperial County Historical Society in Southern California, and they helped look up information on the Kanishi family. Lex Nichols for drone mapping it and providing these really amazing maps.
Very cool maps.
Very cool maps. And we had to get kind of special okay from History Colorado and the National Park Service to use that kind of maps. It's very new technology, so we're kind of on the forefront for that. Rebecca, the city clerk, was a lot of help. Tom here, the sexton for the cemetery, they've been a lot of help. And then I've got to thank a couple other people that I started going back to my classmates, really to help document especially the Hispanic history. And a classmate of mine, Danny Chaparro, and Darren Garcia were both extremely helpful in helping track down, in the National Register's nomination, there's a section of what we call notables that are buried here, of people that we could document some of their history, their family history, and that they're buried here, and we've included that. And so we could not have done all that. And I did not do this project alone by any means. I want to know.
You name dropped a lot of names.
Well, I think two of the really most important ones is the project team. Dr. Kathy Corbett out of Denver. She and I researched, we wrote the National Register nomination. Kathy is amazing. She's done many National Register nominations, and she really understands the architectural history, the landscape history, and that. And Jane Daniels has worked on other projects down here, but she really took the information, helped with a lot of the projects, a lot of the outreach, a lot of the other things, and really wrote the Untold Stories. I found out I was too close to some of the people. It was just, this is a heart project, and I couldn't do it. And Jane did an amazing job. And then I want to say that on September 11th, it's a Wednesday, at the depot here in Rocky Ford, Kathy, Jane, and I will be doing a presentation on this project, a lot more detail.
Oh, cool.
And we'll share that with everybody. So we really put it on your calendars, and we hope everybody comes.
Absolutely. We'll make sure Seco News is there.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you and your dedication to our history and preserving that history.
And I do want to quell any concerns. There's a little bit, well, it's on the National Register, now we can't do anything. We can't trim trees. We can't, maintain. And that is not true. Anything, the peonies and the kind of the concept of how the trees are planted are part of the historic character. But anything can be trimmed. The trees can be trimmed. If they die, they can be replaced, all those things. But this does open up the opportunity that we may be able to, we can apply for some grants to maybe some of the headstones that are going to fall over or have been damaged by water and by age. We can do some restoration work on that. So this is really a win-win for the community.
And absolutely a point of pride on our heritage. And really telling those untold stories. And putting it on the map nationally. And I'm hoping that we just did the 5 on this, but I'd like to continue doing this. There's so many more at this cemetery and at other cemeteries in Otero County. The county CLG board, we can work any place. We don't work within the city limits of La Junta. They have their own historic preservation board in CLG, but we can work in all the other areas. So there's a lot of some new ideas and opportunities we have going forward. Okay, well, I see us doing this again in the future. I think so. We'll have you back. Yes. We'll have to do one of those history hikes like we did with Rick. Yeah, there you go. We can do that. All right, very good. For Rebecca Goodwin and the Otero County Historic Preservation, I'm Adrian Hart from Valley View Cemetery and Hillcrest Cemetery in Rocky Ford, Colorado, with your Southeast Colorado news. Thank you, Adrian.